time to call your lawyer.
Time for Ask the Lawyer with Bruce L. Scheiner, our weekly conversation with my friend and yours, attorney for the injured, Bruce L. Scheiner. And maybe, just maybe, this is the week that you get your question answered. That is, if you submitted a question somewhere along the line. If you'd like to, I'll tell you how to do that. Coming up in just a quick moment. Stand by. Before we get into any of today's conversation, let me remind you that this should not be taken as specific legal advice in your specific situation. This is just general legal conversation. You really need to sit down with an expert in your case, with your legal predicament, and get an expert opinion. That said, there's some general advice we can pass along that makes a lot of sense. First of all, don't make any statements, don't let anybody record any statements, and do not sign anything until you get a consultation. Now, many attorneys offer a free consultation. Bruce L. Scheiner certainly does. That would be one avenue for you. So keep that in mind. I'll tell you more in just a moment. Let's get started with today's Ask the Lawyer on Kicks Country 92.9. Would you please help me welcome Bruce L. Scheiner, attorney for the injured. Good morning to you, Bruce.
Good morning, Todd.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm a little hot, but we'll make it through the summer.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, but then I've made it through quite a goodly number, so I guess I'll make it through another one. We have somebody who has unfortunately had a bad experience, a very bad experience, and they don't know where to turn. Are you ready for today's question?
I am very ready.
All right. Here's what it says. I was the passenger in my father-in-law's car when a drunk driver crossed over the center line and crashed head-on into the vehicle I was a passenger in. I was life-flighted to Lee Memorial Hospital. I have extremely large medical bills and very severe injuries. The drunk driver had no insurance, and I don't own a car. My father-in-law has full coverage, including uninsured motorist coverage, but not enough for all my bills. But he also has something called an umbrella policy. What is an umbrella policy? Is that something that can help with my situation? Oh, boy, that's something we have to turn to you and say, what do you think?
Yeah, somebody put a puzzle when they made this question.
Sure,
but
yeah.
To answer the specific question, an umbrella policy is a policy that extends over your normal liability policy.
Mm-hmm.
So in Florida, a lot of people have 100,000/300,000 of liability, and then the minimum for an umbrella is usually $1 million.
I see.
So hopefully there'd be $1,100,000 available to this person, and she's really, really fortunate that her father-in-law was smart enough to have that kind of uninsured motorist coverage. We spoke about uninsured motorist coverage many times before. This is a great example of why it's so important. Just as an aside, it's when you have a claim against or caused by a drunk driver, juries usually get very, very upset that someone was driving drunk and inflicted serious injuries. So there's a tendency to award higher damages to someone injured by a drunk driver.
I see.
So the answer to the question would be to go to the insurance company of her father-in-law for both the underlying liability limits and the umbrella coverage.
Why would someone take out an umbrella policy? What's the benefit?
Well, the benefit is that here in Florida, most drivers either have no insurance at all, or they have the minimum limits, which are $10,000.
Okay.
So in a case like we have here, this lady has hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical bills. She's got to live with very severe injuries, and the only way to protect yourself is to have as high a limits of uninsured motorist coverage as you could possibly afford.
So obviously her father-in-law was a believer in what you just said, what we always preach about making sure you have as much coverage as you can afford and then some.
That is correct. And as we've discussed in the past, if you're purchasing uninsured motorist coverage and you have more than one vehicle, you should always elect the stacking form of uninsured motorist coverage as opposed to the non-stacking. And as an example, if you have 3 vehicles with over $300,000 of liability coverage, then you'll have $300,000 over $900,000 of uninsured motorist coverage.
And it sounds like she's going to need that kind of resources.
And you know, a lot of times when I talk about $300,000, $900,000 of uninsured motorist coverage, people look at me like, why are you talking about those kind of numbers?
Mm-hmm.
But today, if you're seriously injured and you go to the hospital, the bills are humongous, gigantic.
Right.
I mean, they add up so quickly, and that's the only way to get the money to pay those kind of hospital bills.
Well, in this case, she doesn't go into a lot of detail about her specific injuries other than to say she was very severely injured. But presumably, if there were rehab necessary and that kind of thing, that's going to take money in the future on top of whatever bills need to be paid today.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
You've got to get a professional on this, and you've got to do it now, because this is going to be a very detailed case. It sounds like to be, anyway.
Well, you're right, and I've handled many cases where somebody's crossed over the center line, and later on when you have to file